episode, almost said 11th, because that's what it says in the script. 13th episode of the How Songs Are Made podcast, where we talk to notable artists about their songwriting process. I am your host, Trey Xavier, and today we're going to be talking to my good friend MYRONE about how he writes songs. Today's episode is sponsored by the amazing DistroKid and their awesome Splits feature. This is the DistroKid feature that I have used the most. Basically, you can very easily split all the incoming money from any given track or album between yourself and unlimited collaborators. For example, if MYRONE here and I wrote a sick little jam, we could split at 50-50 when we upload it, and then we don't have to worry about it. We're not going to be, 10 years down the line being like, you held out on me, bro. Where's my money? DistroKid automatically splits all the incoming revenue, and he'll never have to worry if I'm holding out on him. Deadbeat collaborators will never be a problem. Your collaborators will have to make a DistroKid account, but they'll get a 50% discount, so it's only $10. And as always, DistroKid never takes a cut. You and your collaborators get 100% of the earnings in total. Check the link in the description for 7% off your first year of DistroKid. Ooh. Not bad, eh? So, he's the godfather of soft shred. He's the ripping guitar that you've heard on the Cobra Kai soundtrack. He is in a crazy sick band called Firstborn with Chris Adler. He's produced for Rivers Cuomo of Weezer. His most recent single as MYRONE, which is called Track Day, is out now, and he cannot be stopped. Please give a warm welcome to my friend, MYRONE. Woo! And the applause it's going to go in a second. It never goes on time. Amazing. I'm like, yeah! And then it comes at a really anticlimactic time, and it's funny.
I hope it comes in like 5 minutes later at like a really awkward time. It'll be good.
Yeah. So, how are you doing, my dude?
I'm chilling. Working on the MYRONE album is finished. I'm working on finishing the Firstborn album, which has been a long, crazy process, but very fun and rewarding.
Yes! There
Very
it
tight.
is.
Wow.
Oh boy. Let's just throw some party horns on top of that.
Let's go.
Now we're ready. We're before. But here we go.
Amazing. Yeah, and then trying to think of what else. Just the usual writing and session work that I can come across in my day-to-day, and just trying to keep busy and stay sane.
Well, part of the reason that I wanted to have you on, aside from the obvious, which is just that you're incredibly sick all the way around, is that not only are you doing your own thing, which is very unique, you're making really great instrumental music, which is very hard to do, with a lot of flavor. You are a working producer and songwriter for other artists. You're doing all of the things. You're doing all the things. You're coming at it from a variety of different angles. You're doing session work, the whole thing. And I really wanted to get the perspective of somebody like you. And on top of that, you are my first in-person IRL guest.
Oh yeah,
which is
here.
crazy.
We're here. Look.
We out here. Just like
I don't know.
Is me in your cam. You're in my.
Whoa.
It's crazy. Hold on. I'm gonna turn up your mic a little bit more.
Yeah, turn
If
it
I can
up.
Turn up. Okay.
Hello. There we go. Ooh, that looks like a strong signal.
Strong. Yeah, that's better. Okay, cool. So, in reality, there is only one question on this podcast. Sorry, I forget that I set it up so that we could look at each other and not at the screen.
Oh,
but
okay.
I didn't think about that until just now because I was looking at the screen. It's fine. This is a learning experience.
Okay, cool. We're figuring it out, which is not unlike songwriting.
I also preempted the fact that you guys can't tell on camera. MYRONE is 19 feet tall, so I had to set it up so that I wouldn't be like, hey. So there's only one question on this podcast, really, and all the other ones are follow-ups. But normally we're talking about songwriting in the context of a particular album, but because you're doing so many different things, I didn't want to frame this one in that context. I want to know about your songwriting process as a whole. But the question is, what is your typical songwriting process like? And how does it differ for the various projects that you're involved in? Maybe,
well, I guess the short answer to that is that it's always different. But I guess we could compare like MYRONE and Firstborn. Both of those projects have different like mechanically the songs get made in a little bit of a different way, but the basic premise is usually the same. I'm a big believer in whenever you're like in front of the workstation or whatever, however it is that you write, as soon as you get the little kernel of an idea, sometimes it's a guitar riff, sometimes it's like on MYRONE, I write a lot on piano actually, so it's like as soon as I get the little piano melody, my first thought always is like, how can I just make this into a song? Like, how can I get this to be like 3 minutes or 2 minutes 45 seconds or whatever? Like, I need the skeleton of the song to happen like as fast as possible, because when I was starting out, I would open up my computer and make like little 8-bar loops or whatever, which is fine. But I find that like if you go through that process and you make the little 8-bar loop and then you're like, okay, cool, like I'm done for the day. When you come back to just the 8-bar loop, it's hard to like expand it into a song because you're no longer in that like little flow state that you got into in the first place. So if you use that initial flow state to get the like the full like and like when I mean like get the song written, I mean it can be like crappy. Like you have to allow yourself to be like super shitty, but just getting that skeleton down. Like so for Firstborn, the way it works is I will sit down with my guitar, and
hang on one hot second. I just realized the reason your voice is so quiet is because the compressor isn't actually on.
Oh yeah, turn on that compressor.
Talk a little bit again.
Hello.
Okay. There we go.
Yeah, so I'll sit down with my guitar and I'll just like sit there and play, and usually a little like a riff will start to happen, like a little idea, like a little motif will start to happen, and I'm like, okay, great, that's something. I'm gonna like just hit record, and a lot of times I'll just improvise it. Like I'll be like, all right, this riff that I'm playing, it feels like a chorus. So all right, so I need to like I'm gonna hit record, and whatever happens is gonna be the intro riff, and then I'll just keep going and keep improvising, and as soon as I get that like verse, pre-chorus, chorus thing, I'm like good, and then I'll sit there with it, and I'll super lazy, like copy paste stuff. I'll kind of just mash stuff around, and if I'm lucky, the process usually takes like 10 or 15 minutes, and I'll make a bunch of those, and then I'll send them to Chris, and Chris out of those, they're not all good. Some of them are literally horrible, and I'll send those to Chris, and Chris will play drums. And usually when Chris plays drums on them, I'll be like, oh, cool, like this riff needs to like change. And then Chris has really amazing ideas as well, obviously. And he'll be like, oh, we should put this riff here, or, you keep kind of working on it. But you can't do any of that stuff unless you have like the bare bones skeleton of a complete song idea first. Because you can have like all the loops in the world, and it's like there's not a lot you can do with that.
So you're immediately trying to get an arrangement, a structure for the song, a basic structure. That's so it's inception, structure immediately, as soon as you can get it,
as soon as possible. And because I find it, I mean, everybody's different, but I find it's much easier to build your house if the foundation is strong. It's much easier to put like meat on the bones rather than like you have this like huge vertical stack of like an 8-bar loop, and you're like, okay, great, like I've got my loop. It sounds like a smash hit like chorus. All right, what do I do for the verse?
That's one brick of the house.
Yeah, you kind of like you waste all your initial inspiration on like making like the, I don't know, like the fireplace or whatever.
Yeah.
And you need a kitchen and like a bedroom. So I like, having everything like pre-planned out. So when you go add the meat, that way it's just, you can make sure that stuff is good before you really start fleshing it out.
Cool.
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know, this is he's talking about specifically his metal band with Chris Adler, James Lomenzo, and this crazy inhuman singer, Garish,
the legend,
who's outrageously good. So what happens next once you've got that?
So me and Chris will kind of like build up the tracks, and there's with Firstborn, there's kind of like this whittling away process. Like I would say out of every 10 or so riffs that I send to Chris, like 1 or 2 of them he'll be like, these are like good enough for me to like put drums on, which is good. Like that's most people that I talk to that do music, they would say like, yeah, it's like 1 out of every 10 or 1 out of every 20 ideas that you have is like good enough to like pursue.
Yeah.
So there's a filtering process where like Chris will play on the stuff that he like feels a connection to, and then me and Chris will go back and forth and kind of build it up. And then out of the pile of those like tracks, we'll send those to Garish for vocals. And it's like, oh, there's only so many of those that like he gets inspired or he gets like vocal ideas for. So there's this kind of like natural like whittling away process. And then the last step is once like the vocals and the song is like written, we send it to James, and James usually like will like play the most amazing bass that I've ever heard. But sometimes he'll come up with like little like special teams like ideas right at the end. Like there have been a couple where he's put like synth, like real like subtle synth parts or background vocals. Like he's amazing, like true like amazing versatile musician, like coming in with like the little magic fairy dust at the end. And then out of those, only some of those are like we're like, this is like a truly like good song and we should release it.
Yeah.
So there's this kind of like natural like filtering process that takes place. With MYRONE, it's different. With MYRONE, I like to write all the stuff on keys because it's an instrumental guitar project, and I find that a lot of times when you're writing instrumental guitar stuff, I have that like lizard guitar player brain that's just like, oh, just play as fast as possible all the time, just do things that are impressive,
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that's not what makes what's impressive to play on the guitar doesn't necessarily make a good song. And I find I come up with more interesting melodies if I'm like writing them on keys or something like that. So the skeleton part of my own song usually is a lot of times is like a maybe like a piano or like a Rhodes of me kind of like going through like the melody. And so like I wish I like had one like available, like, but my skeletons are they're so crappy. They have like mistakes in them, like they'll have the wrong chords because I do it super fast. A lot of times I act like, oh, like maybe I'm like on stage and someone has a gun to my head and they say like, play, like make me a song like right now, and I'm like, that's kind of like the mentality that I write at, because it only takes you like 10 or 15 minutes to write like a song idea. Like think about how many of those that you can do. Like you can really crank them out.
Yeah.
And then you can out of all those ideas, you can pick like the best ones and be like, all right, this one I like when I just play it on keyboard, like I remember that melody. So maybe there's something good and memorable about this, and maybe we can like flesh it out and make it good.
So when you're writing the MYRONE stuff, you mentioned melody several times, which to me is the staple, the hallmark of MYRONE stuff. Is so melodic, super, just top lines for days, like on the different instruments, not just on guitar, because you got a lot of melody in all of your synth parts and stuff like that. So are you typically thinking of the melody first and writing around
Yes.
that more than anything else?
Yeah, melody first. A lot of times, they happen in different ways. Sometimes I'll figure out like a cool chord change. I'm like, oh, those are there's sort of like cool movement between these like sets of chords, and then a melody will kind of like happen on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes I always try to do melodies that like I always imagine this kind of like fantasy situation where like I've made it, I'm playing the stadium, and I'm playing my guitar part, and I can hear the audience sing along. Well, if you're gonna have a big audience of like, thousands of people singing a melody, it's got to be kind of simple, So I always try to write stuff that like I'm not like a great singer, so like, if I can like sing it in my mind, or like I've even put a mic up and like just like sang melodies into the computer to play on guitar later. That helps it be like more musical rather than just like, oh, like it's just like a guitar player like just running scales.
Yeah, I think that's a good philosophy to have, especially I mean, obviously it works a great deal. Like every time I listen to you play, even when you're playing solos, I've never felt like you are unnecessarily wanky or shreddy for the sake of shreddy.
Well,
even when you're ripping,
I'm not good enough to do the hard
stuff. You're very what's the word? You're very modest. Because there's plenty of shred, but it's never annoying, and I think that's partly because of what you're talking about. But also because you tend to start with a very strong melody or a melodic idea, even in your like Firstborn solos, and then if there's gonna be some ripping, it's like instead of slather it all over the whole thing just to be a wanker.
Well, also honestly, a lot of the reason why it's like that is I have my fantasy situation of the crowd singing the solo,
Mm-hmm.
but I also have my nightmare situation of, oh crap, I forgot the song. So a lot of times it's like the desire to be like memorable is like for me. So when I'm all on stage and I'm all nervous, I'm like, oh yeah, how does the song go? Oh yeah, it goes like this, and I can like I hear the melody in my head rather than like, and I understand it as like a memorable melody rather than like it starts on the 17th fret and then I do tapping and then I do split arpeggio and then like I would
when we bar tithe and we're out.
Yeah, exactly. That sounds insanely stressful to me. And shout out to the people that can do that because I cannot.
So, once you've got let's say for a MYRONE track, you've got that melody and just a basic outline on piano or whatever. How do you generally build it out from there? Let's use track day as an example, because
okay.
Mainly because I've got it in my ears.
Right. That was the first thing I think I came up with. There's one of my favorite patches in the entire world is in the Korg Legacy VST bundle there, which is all of Korg's like old synths. In the M1, which is like kind of a late 80s, 90s synth workstation, there's a patch called Super Brass or something, which is like basically like the most like just like the funniest like late 80s like fake like synth brass sound. And I was just like, all right, let me pull this up and let me get like a little like riff going, and I played that and I was like, okay, this kind of feels like a song. And then it's when you do all this stuff in like 10 minutes, it's kind of hard to remember what came first. But I came up with that, and then I think I pulled up before James played on it. The bass was just like eighth note like synth bass. So I think I just like used the eighth note synth bass and that, and then maybe like a keyboard patch. And I kind of just banged everything out and then started adding more and more stuff. I knew kind of how the drums I wanted them to sound. So I actually programmed out a full drum part before Chris played on it.
Okay.
It was something that I made, and then I was talking to I was working with Chris and James on Firstborn stuff, and I kind of like mustered up the courage. And I was like, would you guys ever want to play on like a MYRONE song? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, oh well, like when am I ever gonna get this opportunity
shit.
again? Yeah. I'm trying to remember if there was anything.
It's definitely the proggiest, I would say, of the MYRONE tracks that I've spent a lot of time with. I think.
Oh, interesting.
It feels like it has it goes the most places for me. At least, I don't know.
Yeah, that was on purpose.
There's a lot.
I was definitely trying to jam like the kitchen sink in there on purpose. Like there's a little, I call it like the lo-fi hip hop part, kind of after the main big solo, where it's just like the keys and the. I was just trying to be funny, basically.
I think fun and humor is is underrated in music. People,
it's how I keep myself from like not getting bored while I'm making it. It's like I have to make it fun for me. So a lot of times that is just me like doing like little inside jokes with myself. Like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if I did like I pulled up like a lo-fi hip hop like VHS piano sound and put like a little part right into like a big like intro or something like that.
It worked.
Yeah. One of the things that I've really been meditating on lately is one of my buddies, this guy Dan Kalisher, he's like an amazing guitar player, session guy, amazing lap steel player, amazing, like just he's like the musician that I want to be. I remember we were talking one time, he was like, a lot of times songwriting is it's all about playing with having some sections be like tight and then some sections be like loose and wide, and kind of like alternating back and forth between those type of dynamics. So like maybe your and you can do it like however way you want, but as long as you have that like change in that juxtaposition, that really helps. Because you never like, it's so funny. Like when I was a kid, when I was like setting up my like guitar sounds, it's like, oh, I want like the one sound that I can use for the entire song. And it's kind of like a bad way of thinking. Like you want your song to have changes and dynamics. You want to be doing different things and having different approaches in different sections, because that's what creates like the arc for the story that you're telling. So like maybe in the verse you'll have like just like a couple tracks and they'll be like really tight and really like staccato, and in the chorus like there's more layers that come in and they're played looser, and even in the mix, like maybe your mix for the verse is like a little bit more mono, and then in the chorus everything comes stereo and it's like this crazy thing.
And what you said is about it working the other way too. Like I didn't think about it working that way, because I almost always do it the way you're describing, like a very sort of staccato tight verse and then big open chorus. But that Dua Lipa song,
yeah, exactly.
It's called "Don't Show Up." Is that don't? Whatever.
Yeah, where it's this big drop and then the chorus is literally just the drums and the bass.
Yeah, and
perfect.
it's super staccato, like boop, boop,
Yeah.
boop, funky bass.
Tight.
Somehow works like gangbusters.
Well, yeah.
But just like you're saying, it's mostly going from one to the other, like, and keeping those things in mind as you're going.
Because it's like you can have a section of your song with like 100 tracks in it, and it will sound small unless you put a section before it that's like one instrument. It's not so much like the amount of stuff in the song, it's like the differences between the sections that's like what creates it's like the moment when you're like listening and your arm hairs stand up or something like that. You're like, whoa, this is so different, I can't believe it like went here, like they took it here with this, that's crazy. That's like what I'm always trying to like chase, is like that feeling like, what, you did that?
Yeah. And it's a trick that you can use a lot, but throughout the course of a song you have to vary it up even within that idea, because if you just do the exact same thing like every time the next part of the song hits, like it loses some of its effectiveness,
Yeah.
right?
Like, when I do like a chorus or whatever, it's like I can't copy paste that chorus 3 times. It's like every time the chorus comes around, there has to be something different. There's got to be something, like maybe I play the riff different. Maybe the vocal does something different. Maybe there's like a extra layer. Maybe the drum, instead of like riding the hi-hat, is riding a crash, or like vice versa. Like it's this constant struggle of, I think someone said that the average attention span like now is like 4 seconds or so. Like they do. I don't know how they measure that, but I heard that and I believe it, because that's how short my attention span is. So when you think about that, it's like, okay, like if you're doing anything, if things are stagnant for like longer than that, people are gonna hit next on Spotify. They're gonna hit the shuffle button and you're not gonna get your stream or whatever. So I constantly think about like, all right, like I gotta grab this person's attention, and then I cannot, like, it's like, no, don't focus on that. No. Here's a new thing. Here's a new guitar lick. Here's like, you're like constant. It's like you're in front of a baby, and you're like, no, look at that. That's what making songs is.
Babysitting songwriting with Myron.
Yeah, because people, and like I do this, like I'll like listen to music and I'll be like, no, because of how like ubiquitous and how like how there's just so much content and so much music. It's like you really gotta compete and make sure people's attention is captivated. And you think like, oh, I just gotta keep this person's attention for 3 minutes. It's so hard. It's impossible, because there's 90 billion other people that are probably better than you at keeping this person's attention. So you really got to try, and you really got to think like, how is the song evolving? How is it changing? How am I playing with the dynamics? Like how is this changing over time? Because it's one thing to make like a little 8-bar loop. It's another thing entirely to like come up with a structure that tells a story that touches on different things, but also at the same time is wrapped up into like a singular idea that someone can say, oh, I heard the song the other day. It's super great. It goes da na 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 na. Like
yeah. And you're thinking like that for your own music, of course, but also you're, like we've discussed, you're working on other people's music. You are, unless I'm wrong, you're writing for other people as well as producing them.
Yeah.
So you are presenting music to them, and you're like, hey, here's something that I think will basically make you money. You might like this here.
Yeah. Well,
or whatever.
When I write for other artists, like usually in the times that it's come out, it's like usually they're in the room. Like when I worked with Little Boots, for example, she came over and we like made stuff together. And that's super fun because it's you get to figure out like, oh, like what do they like? What vision do they have for like their song? Because they're the ones that have to go out and like sell it and play it and do all the work and do all this stuff. So it's really fun to kind of like, get inside their head and be like, oh, like what are you listening to? Like what kind of sounds are you envisioning for your new project? And you can, in some ways, it's like it's almost more fun because it's like you're like, with MYRONE, I'm like, oh, it's got to kind of sound like this because like my aesthetic's kind of like this, and like I kind of have like a little niche that's like this vibe. And sometimes it's like very freeing to just be like, all right, I'm just gonna do like what this person wants and like offer them like help them like find like their like treasure or whatever.
Yeah, but you're also like, you are thinking about their success as an artist, but they're also you're thinking about what's going to make them happy and stoked for their song.
Yeah.
And I imagine that part of that, at least for me as a piece of shit narcissist, having external validation and like having people like what you do, having that success of whatever kind, like positive reinforcement. I guess I'm curious how much you're thinking about that kind of thing, like as you're going, not whether or not it's going to make the money necessarily or whatever, but like going like, okay, what is the listener going to like? What's the average listener going to think about these short attention span? You know, are you going like, or is it unconscious, or are you just not, or you just go for it, whatever?
I try, first and foremost, I try to make stuff that I like, or in the case if I'm working for an artist, I try to make stuff that they like. Like with Firstborn, whenever I send riffs to Chris, like we've been working on stuff for almost 2.5 years at this point. I kind of know what kind of stuff Chris likes to play drums on, because there's been a lot of stuff I've sent him where he's like, and I'm like, what? It's so cool. And it's like, he's like, yeah, but like, you know, he's got like a style. Yeah. So the number one objective is making stuff that everybody on the team likes, and then the second objective is finishing the song. Because, you know, I've done a lot of sessions where I've sat there and I've made beats for people, or I've been like, what about this? What about this? What about this? And then it's like at the end of the day, you don't have anything, which stinks, but you know, that happens. You know, it's you're not gonna like hit it off and write amazingly with everybody. I've had some sessions where like I felt like a fool afterwards. I'm like, wow, like I just spent like 8 hours in this room with this person, and like it was super awkward the whole time, and I didn't come up with anything good, and that's always rough. But hey, it happens, you know.
Damn, that first of all, that sounds humbling.
Oh yeah, but the older I get, the more I seek out situations where I get humbled, because that's what makes me better, you know. It's like if I just like stay in my comfort zone and keep making the same stuff, like I'm gonna stagnate. Like, I want to be in situations where like I'm writing with people, where they're like, oh, like this is cool, but like, can you work on this? Like, for example, this week and last week, I've been dipping my toe back into K-pop stuff again. And one of the challenges with that genre in particular is they really like all the sections of the song to really have like unique feelings. Like one of the beats I did, it kind of has like a like Aha, Take On Me kind of vibe in the verse, and then the chorus is hardstyle, like you know, like it's crazy. But I sent that in, and it's a lot of work to do tracks like that, because you just have to do all these changes, and there's so many different sections. I remember I sent it in, and my friend that I'm writing with, who's like he's amazing. He was like, "This is really good, but can we work on like the toms and the pre-chorus?" I was like, "Oh, okay." Like I thought I sent in like an undeniable banger, and he was like, "This is cool, but like let's get those toms though." I was like, "All right," but I love that.
Yeah,
you know, like it's like I turned in like maximum effort work. And then they were like, "Oh, we need a little bit more." So I'm like, "Okay, cool." Like I'm getting stronger in this moment, because people are like, they're like, "More," you know? Like it's
you were like, "Witness me," and he was like, "Mediocre."
Yeah, exactly. I was like, "Oh, yes," you know. In my younger years, I'd have been like, "Oh, this they don't know what they're talking about," like, blah, blah, blah. But now I'm like, "Okay, cool, all right, sick." And yeah, even Chris, like a couple times on riffs, like he calls it like. I remember when I talked to him, I was like, why did you want to work with me? And he was like, "Oh, you know, I've been listening to your stuff for a while, and like there were a couple ones you did that were like a little bit more metal, and I knew if I like kicked your ass a little bit that we could do like some good stuff." And I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, makes sense, because I've definitely sent some stuff to him, and he's just been like, "No, this is not."
Nope.
Yeah, it was just good, you know.
Putting a lot of faith in you, you know, like he's expecting you to bring the majority of the ideas to the table.
I wouldn't
right?
say that.
No?
I mean, he'll like text me and be like, "Oh, we should do a song." He's like, "Can you?" Like he's the king of like the Apple like voice notes.
Mm-hmm.
He'll be like, "Oh, can you like do like a riff that's like dun 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 dun?" You know, like he'll like send me stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
And like, and I'll be, and it's to me, I love like an assignment. You know, when people are like, "Oh, can we try something like this?" Especially when I'm like, "Oh, I don't know about that. Like that doesn't sound like a good idea." Just forcing myself to go through that process of trying something that's like outside my comfort zone usually yields something that is at least interesting. I don't know, like, you know, I never know if anything is like good or bad, but there are definitely times when things are like interesting and not interesting. And usually when people are like, "Oh, can you try doing something like this?" I know it's not usually your like what you do, but like let's maybe like try this. And I'm like, "Oh." Because usually what happens is I'll try to do what they want and I can't do it. So I like make up my own like fake way of doing it. And it's like, oh, like it's my style and with like a added flavor and it's something new and fresh.
So you're consistently being pushed because
I try to be. When I don't feel like I'm being pushed or like I don't feel like it's like going to the gym, you know? It's like if you're in there and you're like you want to go in there and like set PRs or whatever. You want the weights to go up. You want your body to like feel better. Music's the same way. Like you want to like be working on stuff that's like outside of your comfort zone. You want to be trying stuff that you haven't tried before. Because if you just do the same thing over and over again, you're gonna get the same results, and which can work for some people. I mean, there are people that have made amazing careers out of just like doing the same thing over and over again. But I don't. Well, but they're like, if I did what AC/DC did, I would. Yeah, of course.
Why would you change?
Yeah, like
if you find enormous success doing one thing, I always tell people this, like with YouTube, like if you have a gigantic hit on YouTube, just do the same thing over and over again until you die. Like just basically like if it keeps hitting every time, and it probably will, if you find a formula, just go with it. Like,
yeah.
But if you're that,
but like,
so I guess
find the formula. Like all of my songs kind of have like the same structure. Like I don't really stray too far out of like the verse, chorus, bridge, solo, chorus song structure, but because it works. But you know, like there's some stuff that there's just got to be formulaic, and you gotta kind of like rest on like the stuff that you're good at. But at the same time, it's like you want to keep trying like new things, and that process can be scary sometimes because you'll try some new stuff and the result will just be like the worst thing that you've ever heard. Like I have so many like stuff that I made where I'm like embarrassed about it. I'm like, oh my god, I can't believe I thought this was dope.
But at the same time, what's the actual downside? It sits in a folder on your computer. Nobody else ever has to hear it.
Or I mean, I did upload about 280 songs to Bandcamp the other day because there was all the stuff that like, well, I'm not going to do anything with this, and if you're curious, you can go listen to it.
I'm very curious about that, actually. It was, what was it called?
I called it data breach.
Data breach?
You know, just like
as if
like
someone
like hacked my computer and found all my embarrassing demos and put them on the internet.
That's a fucking hell of a tactic, though. That's a thing. Like, how
they weren't. I mean, I just had them on my computer. They weren't doing anything. I was like, well, I could try to make money off these, I guess. But I mean, some of them are just like beats I made in sessions, or like just stuff I made. Like a lot of it is just stuff that I like made and hit export and like maybe like never listened to again. And like some of it is like, ooh, I don't know about that.
It's the Buckethead approach. The volume.
Man, I love
sheer
Buckethead.
volume. Well, how does he fucking do it though?
He just has discipline. He just does it. You know, you get to a point with your craft and your, you know, just like jazz guys can, you know, sit in a session and you know, it's like, oh, it's your turn to solo, and they can just come up with stuff for like 8 hours.
Yeah.
The same thing goes for songwriting. You just get to a place with your craft, and like, you know, Buckethead has his things that he does. You know, he has like a style. And you just iterate on the style, You know, like you were saying earlier with like the YouTube video like formula, it's like you figure out what your strengths are and you kind of just make like a billion of those ideas, and some are good, some are bad, and you just keep doing it, you know.
So what's a typical day look like for you? Like generally, if you don't have a session with someone else that you're writing with, what do you do? If you're like, today's the day that I'm going to do some songwriting.
I'll take you back to Wednesday of last week, because I feel like that was like a nice day for me. I felt like I was in my element and I felt like I was doing all the things I should. Wednesday was cool because I woke up, I went to the gym. If people have been paying attention to all the gym metaphors, I like for the first time in my life, I've been like regularly going to the gym, which has been awesome. Highly recommend going to the gym. Rules. I'll go to the gym, like wake up, eat breakfast, go to the gym. I'll get showered, and then I'll sit in front of my computer. And on that particular day, my K-pop writer friend was like, "Oh, like." The side note to all this is I have this K-pop writer friend who's like the most insane vocalist I've ever worked with, and he kind of like left the industry for a little bit, or like he kind of like got into computer programming for a little bit, and then he hit me up and he's like, "Oh, I'm back, like I need tracks." I was like, "What kind of tracks do you need?" And he sent me over like the labels will sometimes like have like lists like who's looking, what kind of stuff they want. I was like, "Okay, sick." So I like made like a track for him, which took, because it was K-pop track, like took a better part of the day, like maybe 4 or 5 hours. And then it's at some point during that time there was lunch happened. Probably like some like house stuff happened, and then dinner happened, and then at the end of the day, so India time and America time are literally opposite. I think it depends on if it's daylight savings time or not, but right now it's the opposite plus or minus 30 minutes. So usually kind of at night, that's when I'll hear from Girish, and Girish like sent me like some vocal takes for a song that we're working on. And I kind of like went back and forth with him a little bit, like, "Oh, can you try this here?" Like, and then by that time it was like night, so I like fired up some Elden Ring and then relaxed and then went to bed.
Yeah. So it's that's a good day. That's a productive. You felt
that's ideal. I it kind of depends on like if I'm like in finishing mode or if I'm just doing like raw output. Like if I'm doing raw output, like just making skeletons, especially for Firstborn, I can knock like 3 of those out on like a good day, like full like 3-minute like just like riff skeleton things for Chris to play on. So like in the last like year or so, it's like I've woken up, I've like I'll like do gym or take care of the business, and then I'll like send a bunch of skeletons to Chris, and then the other part of this is like just like emailing people, like just emailing people songs all the time, all the day, every day. Like I do it to the point where I personally feel like I'm being annoying, but like I'll just I have like folders and folders of songs on my computer, and I'll check in with like industry people all the time, be like, "Hey, like how's it going? Like what are you working on? Here's like here's like what I'm doing." And then either something will happen or something might not happen. But it's all, I just try to like stay in the process of making files to send to people, and then getting those files back, and then finishing them, and then sending to other people, and I just kind of try to keep it going at this point. And every day is like a little bit different. Sometimes I'm doing skeletons, sometimes I'm like mixing songs and like finishing them and doing all like the nitty gritty like weird like mix decisions, like tweaking the arrangements. But on a very basic level, it's just making the file and sending the file.
Making the file, send the file.
And just repeating that process like forever and ever and ever, you know?
Well, it's cool to hear like that you just have so many of these files.
Yeah, most of them are bad though. I wanna like emphasize that. Like most most are like not good. But that's normal. That's everybody. Everybody that I've ever met and I've talked to, it's like, oh yeah, like yeah, it's like.
But that's
great.
why you have to have so many of them.
Yeah,
because you want the tip of your the tip of your iceberg grows a lot slower than the whole iceberg, but you have to grow the tip by a lot, because if the tip is only one song and the rest of the iceberg is 10 songs, you can't make a career out of this unless you get really, really super duper lucky. You want the tip of the iceberg to be 1,000 songs and 10,000 underneath or whatever. And so you gotta, but you're that's what it takes is that much sheer output, and it seems like, and it seems to be working out pretty well for you. You don't have another job, right? You're not a janitor.
I'm doing music full time. I mean, some days it's better than others, and like, you know, there definitely have been moments when I'm in my life where like I've been like, oh God, like I don't know what I'm doing. But you know, I'm still here. I'm still making stuff. I still have all my hands and my fingers. So I guess I'm gonna like keep on making this stuff and hoping that it works out, I guess.
So tell us a little bit about the MYRONE album that you that's done now. Is that going to have the single on it, Track Day?
Yeah. Track Day's on there.
What is it called? The album?
It's called Soft Shred Universe.
You didn't call it the Huniverse? Oh. Yeah. Go back to the.
Dang.
Go in your Photoshop file.
Oh man.
And just fix it.
Oh crap. That's pretty good. No, I think it's gonna be called
Soft Shred Universe.
Maybe Huniverse is the next one, like the evolution.
The expanded
expanded edition. Soft Shred Universe, the Huniverse. It's I finished like the audio portion of it last year, and it's the first time where there are outside players on it, which is kind of cool. You know, Chris and James play on one, and then there are a couple others where my friend Omar, who plays bass for Blackpink, he plays bass on a couple tracks. This drummer I found off TikTok named Maestro plays on a couple tracks, and I'm really excited about them. They're very like straight up like fusion, like,
oh wow,
like fun. Yeah, they're fun. And then, you know, it's got the, you know, usual assortment of like different styles, like me trying to play guitar over stuff that normally doesn't have solo guitar on. Like there's kind of like a 90s house track that I'm pretty excited about. That's got some tasty licks over the top of it. But yeah.
I kind of feel like that's the moment when I usually notice a certain artist who has been maybe just a lot of like bedroom producer types of guitarists and stuff like that, who have like been doing everything themselves for a while, and then they kind of like open it up and like make it a more of a live band type of thing. Like when they, you know, they go like, oh, I guess I could like have other people play on it.
Yeah, I guess
that
I
to
could
me
have
feels like
a
usually
drummer
when
play on this instead of me just programming it. Which, by the way, like, oh, also, yeah, shout out to every drummer that spent the pandemic like really getting their home recording situation like on lock, because that is the future. Like me being able to like, you know, like kind of rough out these songs and like, you know, program like crappy drums and then be able to send it to these guys who are like super good, and they have their like recording stuff like sorted, it's like, yes, finally, you know.
It's the kick in the pants that they needed.
Well, yeah, it's like the studio is at home now. Like everything sounds good. Like everybody's got the same plugins that, you know, the people that are winning Grammys have. It's kind of like no excuse anymore, but it's great. Like I feel like in this weird, like disjointed way of like me like sending files back and forth, like I'm finally getting the thing that I always wanted, which is like I want my music to have this kind of like live energy to it of, you know, people playing. And it's I you know, in the past I've spent like a long time like trying to program like really realistic drum parts, and there's stuff on my album that's still programmed, but man, even if like the drums like aren't like recorded as well as like the sample libraries, it's like always better. It's the best, especially when you work with great players. Like I'm really lucky that like I have access to like some of these guys, and it's just, man, when you like send somebody like something that like I like the two that Omar and Maestro play on, like I had those two like pretty much like I was like excited about them, and I was like, oh well, maybe I should just try like having them play on it, and it's just they just take it to like the next level like every time, and it's the best.
When you bring in specialists on their instruments, on anything really, you realize all of your shortcomings in that area.
Yeah.
And you go like, oh, like I'm pretty good at programming drums. I can even play a little bit. And when I hand it off to a real drummer, I just go like, oh no, I'm a fucking idiot.
Yeah. You start
Why didn't I think of that?
You realize a lot of stuff. I realized that a lot with Chris, actually. Like when I first started working with him, I was like, oh, I bet the drums he's gonna send back are like super complex, and he'll be doing stuff that I'll never have like thought of. And it's interesting, like the drum, like his drumming is, I don't want to say more simple than I thought, but it's like pretty straightforward. It's just like he just has this ability to just to keep up the intensity in ways that like I can't even like imagine. But like it's when you work with guys like that, you kind of realize like they don't really focus, like Chris always does what he believes is right for the song. Like he doesn't really care about like being like a shredder drummer. Like he tells me this all the time. He's like, dude, I don't care. Like he's like, I honestly can't believe like people like think that I'm like this like kind of drummer that people think I am. Like he just does like what he thinks is right for the song. Now he tries to avoid doing stuff that's like too normal, which can have its advantages and disadvantages. Like sometimes you do need to do like, you know, it's like sometimes like you're like, what should the guitar riff be? Well, it works if I just do like eighth notes on one note. But you know, there's like a part of your brain that says, oh, what if you make it super complicated? Sometimes you just got to do the eighth notes. And Chris is really good about like the parts that need to be like simple, he'll do. But he's really good at like with finding like ways of like doing the simple thing but adding like one little twist that like just makes it super next level. And I'm like, I would have never thought to do that. And it's like a lot of times what he does is not like, it's not really like that mechanically like challenging. It's just like a good idea, you know? And that's in my experience, that's what I find like separates a lot of the people who are like, you know, the legends from like the people who are good.
I think that also plays into a little bit of what you were talking about earlier with the song structure. I find that people who are trying to reinvent the wheel every time with the song structure and create some brand new thing, it's very rarely as compelling as taking a familiar structure and adding little twists to it, changing it up, pushing against the boundaries of what's already in place.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like what you're talking about, like
you want people, by the time the second chorus comes around, you want people to be like screaming it, you know? And you can't do that if you're like faking them out too many times. Like you gotta pick and choose your fake outs, because another amazing thing Chris taught me, he was like, it's all about, you get people doing a head nod, and that you must never let that, like, you cannot let the head nod stop. Like if you put on the song and you're nodding and there's a part where you stop, you have to fucking fix it. The head nod has to go through the entire song. And I was like, oh, I had never really like thought of it like that, but now like when I'm writing, I'll just be like sitting there like, and then I'll, you know, especially like in like transition moments where I like try to drop stuff out or, you know, get too fancy, I'll be listening to it and I'd be like, oh shit, like that's like a little too complicated, and I lose the head nod. Like I need to like keep that energy going. It really, like, it's kind of just like something he like said offhand to me, and I was like, whoa, that is a really next level and like simple way of just thinking about all this.
Wow. Yeah, and I think especially for the kind of music that you guys are playing in that band and what he's played before, Lamb of God and stuff like that, like it's very complex in a lot of ways, but never in a way that makes it, I don't know, that takes away from the experience and the emotional response and the physical feeling of the music, like you're talking about, like with the head nod, with it just always feels really good.
Yeah.
And you're doing a lot in that band. I mean, it's when I was listening to that stuff and the MYRONE stuff, and like I'm thinking about how with the MYRONE stuff, there's all these layers. There's lots of synths and stuff. The melody in the guitar and stuff carries it a lot of the time, but not all the time. With Firstborn, you're just there all the time.
There's less cheating in Firstborn because I really try.
You're killing yourself with no cheating.
I with Firstborn, like the track counts are much lower than MYRONE songs, because it's just like I try to think of it like it's Van Halen. You know, there's guitars, bass, and drums and vocals, and like maybe there's like a little special teams track, but I really try to have it like distilled.
You don't even have rhythm guitar tracks when you're playing solos.
Oh yeah,
I noticed that on every song. I was like, as soon as the solo comes in, rhythm guitar tracks are out, and I was like, damn, that's like nude guitar soloing. Like that's crazy hard.
I think. Oh really? I kind of think it's easier because you can play more like outside notes.
That's true.
Because like if you have a chord there implying like a certain kind of like harmony, like it limits your note choices a little bit. When it's just the root note, you can, you know, I don't really know how to do jazz, but one of I remember there was a day I kind of figured out like a lot of jazz is like putting the pentatonic. I mean, there's probably some jazz guy watching this. It's like, no, this is so wrong. But one of the tricks I figured out is there's all these little moves that you can do with the pentatonic scale, where like if you play that, you know, the minor pentatonic scale that everyone knows, if you just like play that over like different root notes, like there's all this like kind of crazy stuff you can do. And like there's stuff where you can like move it up a half step, or like do it like on like a fifth up, or like all this stuff. There's a really great Scott Henderson video where he talks about doing stuff like this. But if you just have like a bass note, I find you can get away with like doing like little. Yeah, you know, I'm always trying to like do like the fake like Chris Poland like stuff where like you throw in like weird chromatic stuff, and yeah.
There's actually, so first of all, that's not bullshit. That's 100. I studied jazz quite a bit in college.
Okay.
And I literally had jazz teachers tell me like, oh, if you want to play outside, like you literally just like take the right thing and like move it up a half step, like take it a half step out, and like you just literally, like if you want to play outside, just play something that's wrong, like play like with good phrasing and confidently, just one half step up or down and wrong. And also the thing you're talking about, pentatonics, there's a book, it's called Advanced Modern Rock Guitar Soloing or something by oh, what is the guy's name? John. Oh shit, a Berkeley teacher that I read inside and out, and it's all about using pentatonic scales to imply cool modal shit, like you're talking about, like just using basic like box patterns that you already know, and just putting them in a certain place to achieve different sounds.
The one that the one that everyone starts out on, that is like you can get away with just moving that thing anywhere sometimes. It's great.
Yeah, people tend to get stuck in the one spot with it, but you can achieve crazy shit.
Yeah, like and you can do it by just by almost like forcing yourself to mess up. Cause like think about it, what's more interesting, like watching someone like walk down the stairs, or watching someone like on the first step like trip. They fall, they do a fucking backflip and like hit their face, and then they somehow land on their feet at the end. Like, what are you gonna remember more? You know,
that's definitely more interesting to watch. But I wouldn't want to be the guy on the stairs.
Well, sometimes you gotta be, you know, and sometimes you are like not on purpose.
I like that you're really going out on that limb though, because you can hear every little thing when you're just ripping over a bass line and drums, you know, like I've heard a lot, like I love listening to it because it has that element of danger that you're talking about. There's this like like
especially with me, because I'm like, oh, I don't really know what I'm doing. Hope this works out well.
Man, I had a really good question and it went right out of my brain.
Oh, great.
But you okay, so let's see. We're talking about first. Oh, well, so you've also mentioned that there's a Firstborn album that is now it's done.
It's not. No, or it's still
you're
making
working
it.
on it. Okay.
I think like. You know, it always depends. I like want to say like it's mostly like written. Like I would say like half of them are like done, and then the other half like the tracks are done, and like we're just like doing like vocals and getting the bass in there and like. But I say that, but like I'm still like I'm probably gonna go home and like write riffs and send them to Chris, and like you never know, like sometimes like I write one and Chris is like, this is the best thing I've ever heard, I'm sending you drums like tonight, like, well, and then you know I always try to leave room for like, you know, the buzzer beater to happen, you know, like the half court shot that it goes in and it like makes the album and it's like the single or whatever. So but we are like I see like the end of the tunnel on this album or whatever.
Yeah. And because the other things you put out so far, correct me if I'm wrong, have been an EP and a couple of singles, right? So this will be the debut full length.
Yeah, the full length, the fully real the same room. 'Cause I literally haven't met any of them in real life yet. Which is, but I talk to them all the time. I like call them, you know.
Yeah.
I had a lovely phone conversation with James the other day. Like I talk to him all the time. We have like a group chat. But I've never, you know, because like I linked with Chris at the end of 2019, and then a panini happened, and then so we just.
I remember when that happened. You hit me up and you were like,
"Yeah, I didn't think it was him." I was like,
"Am
I being catfished?"
Happen to know if this is really his email address?
Yeah, I straight up thought I was being catfished. I was like, "Oh my god," but it worked out. I all I care about in life. Like, I just want to, like, be in the same room and like play all the stuff that we've made and just feel it at like a super loud volume, and then B, like, I want to play it for people. I feel like doing a Firstborn show would be so fun. Like, it's like such a selfish project for me, because it's like, if you told me to like, oh, like make your ideal metal band, like I would pick these guys to do it. Like I feel like super lucky all the time that like I'm kind of like in this situation where it's like oh, like I'm writing a metal riff, like what should the drums sound like? Oh, well, why don't I just call like one of the best drummers ever and have him play? Like, oh, what should the bass sound like? Well, like I always like a really fat, like deep low end bass. Oh, this guy is kind of like one of the best guys at doing that. And I really love like kind of like Dio-esque like vocals. Like, oh, well, there's this guy that like he's really good. He's kind of like the only guy that does that. So I feel like super lucky and blessed, and it weirdly like makes it like really easy because I feel like it's just like oh, I basically like I've got these 4 personalities, including myself, and we all have kind of like our distinct styles. So like basically all I have to do is just hit record or have them hit record on their end and send me the file, and it's kind of just like it's easy, you know.
Yeah, I mean, easy of course is relative, but when you're working with top-notch talent, easy gets easier.
Like these guys, you know, Girish has his own band. Like they've all like made records. They're all good at what they do. So there's I don't really have to like produce them too much, you know. They all kind of like produce, you know. I don't have to like really. I mean, I push them in some ways, but they, you know, it's they all have like kind of like a baseline level of excellence that like I'm not in there like fixing stuff usually. It's usually it's like, you know, like they'll send me their files and I just like drag them into the session. I'm like, well, yep, sounds good. Like,
all right,
a little EQ and then send it off.
Cool. Are you mixing the final product also?
The first EP I mixed and like a couple of the singles I mixed, but lately for the album we've been having Machine, who produced Ashes of the Wake and Sacrament, and you know him and Chris go way back, and he's kind of like, you know, the architect behind Chris's like, you know, most revered drum sounds. So, and oh man, I learned so much from him, just getting my stuff mixed by him, like hearing what he does to the files. I'm like, oh, you can do that, okay. And he's great. He has like a level of attention to detail that I do not, and he like really, man, again, like insanely blessed to just like have somebody on this project who like I 100,000% trust to like, all right, here's like what we did, just like give me like the last like most important 10% and like polish it and make it just like slam. And he like, oh man, he's so good. It's incredible.
It's another, like we were talking about, another specialist, you know.
Yeah.
You hand like you're a jack of all trades, but I mean you are doing all of the things that you do at a very high level, but I don't mix at all. Okay, basically zero. I hand my shit off to somebody and they make it into something that sounds like music.
Yeah.
You know, like I imagine for you, you're saying it's kind of like, hey, like I know that I could do this pretty well. They're managing to make it even better because that's what he does all day.
Yeah. Oh man,
you know,
he came up with all the moves that like people like do all the time, you know.
Yeah.
Like there's so many things that he was like the guy that like came up with all this stuff in terms of like just like mixing. So it's just like, oh well, like I could do this, or like I could give it to this person with like 20 more years of experience, or whatever. And
yeah.
he's just so good, you know?
Yeah. Well, I guess I was shocked because I thought the EP sounded awesome. Like,
thanks.
and
yeah.
I mean, I wasn't shocked because I didn't think you could do it or something, but just like I don't think I've ever heard you mix that kind of metal, like,
yeah.
you know what I mean,
was
like the real heavy
it.
shit with real drums and
yeah. Like I was definitely like getting my ass kicked a little bit. Like when I was mixing the EP, like there were moments where I was like, oh, I'm like really overwhelmed because like you know, people were like not happy with, you know, how certain things were translating, and it was like a big learning process for me to like, you know, like I had to go on YouTube and like watch like metal mixing tutorials and figure out. I'm like, wow, how do I get the drums to like hit harder? Like, why can't I get like the bass drum and the kick to like work well together, all this stuff. And like, I go back and listen to it. I'm like, oh man, like I wish I did it a little bit differently, but that's fine. If you think it sounds good, then I guess like mission accomplished,
I'm a little curious about your guitar tone on that, because it's so it's super duper clear. It sounds to me like either single coils or or like real low gain, but I don't know if you're just smacking the shit out of it or what, but like
a lot of it is single coils. I've in the last like year or so, like I've kind of like the older I get, the more all I really want to do is become the archetype of the mystical Strat man, of which that's Jimi Hendrix, Jeff Beck, Richie Blackmore, Yngwie Malmsteen, a guy that plays a Strat with like some like a little magic,
yeah.
I really like that sound. I feel like Strat single coils just like they hit in a certain way. And to me, like, everybody uses humbuckers already. So, and like, my favorite guitar player is like Eddie Van Halen, and that's like the perfect humbucker sound. So I don't know. I'm just trying to do something a little bit different, I guess. But, and like not all of it is single coils. But yeah, like my rhythm tone for Firstborn is very, on the cleaner side. I mean, that first EP, it kind of depends on the song, but like some of the songs are like the Ableton amp into like there's this one IR that I kind of always use. I think it's called like the Catharsis. I don't know. It's like the one metal one that like everybody was using for a while, but and I still use it because it like kind of has like the ideal EQ curve for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, like sometimes it's the Ableton amp sim. Sometimes there's like an Amplitude Fender pack, and I think there's like a super reverb in one of those.
Do you remember we used that for the for that one video that we did?
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Guys, check it out. First of all, there's a bunch of MYRONE videos on the Gear Gods channel.
It's
so if you just
true.
like search, we've done some like real fun, silly shit.
Yeah.
Like driving down the PCH.
Oh, that's a legendary video.
Legendary. And then the one with the dancing skeletons. That's the one that we did for the I think it was for the IK the Amplitude Fender thing.
But lately I've been using the Helix, and like I basically my workflow these days is I just have the Helix 4-board. I'll basically like I have like a couple of like tones that I've made, but like I'm always like I'm always trying to like refine the sound. But the Helix is super cool because they like update it every once in a while and they'll put new stuff. They just put a new amp in that thing called like I think it's called like the Vento or it's VENTOUX. It is the best thing I've ever heard in my life, and the controls are like it's like they took. I feel like I designed it in a way like it's like perfect. Instead of having bass, middle, and treble, it's low pass, middle, and presence. So like when you're dialing up a tone, you're like, this is great, but it's like a little bit too flubby. I'm sorry, high pass. It's a high pass.
Yeah.
So
I can never fucking remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like you just turn the high pass up until it stops being flubby, and it doesn't change the sound. Like it's like all the nice things that you like. And I think in the literature they say it's a mix between like a Fender like tweed sort of sound and an orange. So like kind of like a lower mid gain thing. And man, I was like, oh cool, they dropped a new amp. Like I'll take my preset, which I was using like I go back and forth between like the JCM 800 and the Bassman, and then I run it the impulse response I run it into. I think the Catharsis is like it's like the power section of a 5150 into like vintage 30s, something real like modern metally or whatever. And like I'll either run like the basement into that or the JCM 800. And then when I put this new one in, I was like, oh, this is ideal. Great, like clear, clean tone that's like chunky. It's got good like transient response. Yeah, like the older I get, the more I do, the more like for like rhythm stuff, like the more like clean I really like try to like dial in the guitar. Because if you're thinking about like how your mix is gain staged, like if you record like a super like gained out sound, which is fine, that's like what I do for solos, so it sustains. But it's like you're like you're probably like mixing into like a guitar bus, and you might or might not have like some compression on that, and then that is like going to like your master chain, which probably has all sorts of compression and lid running on it. And if you just think of everything like a guitar amp is something that like compresses and saturates your sound. So you're like taking that and then you're like running it into basically more guitar amps, like compressors and mastering. Those are like guitar amps. If you do all your compression and saturation like off the bat, then you don't have room to do it later. And it also like the clearer and cleaner your guitars is, the more space like the other elements have to fit in the mix. Like having like James play bass is like such a cheat code, because like his bass tone is like really like saturated and like full in the low end. So it's like, okay, great. Like I don't have to do that on my guitar. I can focus more on the mid range, and having that separation between my sound and his is what creates the illusion of like a big sound. It's like all these individual elements that are like really different combining into one. If I had like a super saturated tone and he had a super saturated tone, we would just be fighting each other the entire time. And the same thing goes for the drums. Like I remember when I first started like getting Chris's drums, I was like, oh, they're like cleaner than I thought that they would be. And he was like, yeah, you want them to like, you want stuff to like hit clean, so you can like, when you hit like the master and everything, it like, that's like where your power and your impact comes from, is like all the stuff like hitting the master like super hard. And you can't do that if your transients are getting cut off by like mad like early like gain staging basically.
I've also noticed that with single coil pickups, because I also love the sound of I mean, I like tellies, but I love the sound of single coils. There's a point when you're turning up the gain where it does not become more saturated, it only gets noisier.
Yeah,
I find. And so there's only so much. It's not like with a humbucker where you can just keep going and going and it just gets more and more saturated. Yeah. So there's a threshold where you have to start digging in harder. You have to play better, and like it's not going to make the tone any more metal or heavy or whatever or gainy. There's just a hard limit where you're just making noise.
Yeah, because the single coils have more like top end.
Yeah.
Just because it's one coil and it's not two that are like canceling frequencies.
Right.
Like that's why humbuckers have more mid range, because there's less highs. And by comparison, single coils are a little bit more scooped. So yeah, like you're saying, there is like a moment where like it's like they can sound really bad like really fast. So so it's finding that kind of like nice like butter zone where they, oh man, the way they like handle like palm mutes and like all this stuff, like it just sounds like correct to me. And I got really like hip to that when like years and years and years and years ago, I was like a intern like food runner guy at a studio, and one of the people that would come in and record all the time was Keith Richards, and his recording rig literally is just two like Fender Champs which are like these little, they're like single-ended Class A amps. They just have a volume knob, and like he like turns them up to like maybe 3 or 4, which is like just the edge of it breaking up. And you're like, Keith Richards, like, doesn't he use like a big like amp or whatever? I was talking with his tech, and he was like, no, like, you want it to sound like an acoustic, like you want it to be like an acoustic guitar, so you want to get it so like the engineer can record it, and then like the engineer has then room to like do his thing in the mix. Like if you send him something that's like super like saturated and distorted, there's only so you can only turn that up and down. When you have a little bit of room to like play with the dynamics, play with like the envelopes, and like compress stuff in certain ways, like there's just so much more you can do with it.
Yeah. I want to change tack a little bit because
Okay.
I've had this question in my brain since we were talking about it before. I remembered what it was.
Oh, nice. Callback.
We actually don't usually even do this much gear talk on here.
Oh, whoops.
No. I mean, I was very curious. I wanted to know because I loved the guitar tone so much. I had to hear your philosophy on it. And you're a guitar player. Tone is important.
Yeah.
So, but what I wanted to ask about is, because we were talking about pushing yourself and trying new things, stepping outside of your comfort zone. This is something that I think about a lot. There are certain sounds that sort of catch fire in the mainstream, like stuff that will become such a big deal that people start copying it and making copies of copies. For example, pretty recently, reggaeton became a huge deal, right? Like there were huge hit reggae. I mean, not like super recently. I'm pretty far behind, but like songs having reggaeton influence rhythmically, like that fucking beat is everywhere, right?
Yeah.
There's like an origin point to that, right? It didn't just appear out of nowhere. There are people actively seeking out new sounds,
Yeah.
to utilize in new stuff. Like you were talking about, if you're working with an artist, you're trying to figure out what they're listening to, trying to create a new sound. Is there anything that you do to find stuff like that? Like, are you seeking out new music and listening to it all the time?
Whenever I work with people, I'm like, what are you listening to? I'm like, tell me. Like with like me, like everybody in Firstborn, kind of like we all just like send songs to each other. Like Chris will send me stuff all the time. Like, dude, check this out. And it's like stuff I never thought he would like listen to. Like he put me on he sent me like whatever the last what is it, Volbeat? Yeah, he sent me that record. I was like, this is awesome. He was like, yeah, I know, right? And I was like, yeah, all right, sick, yeah. So I've been like jamming that, and then I really do like try to put in. One of my New Year's resolutions this year was like I wanted to catalog what I was listening to and be a little bit more organized about like you need input for output, right? So you got to be like listening to stuff, and you got to be like, and you can't, I get bored, so I just will go out and like try to find like new stuff to listen to. So one of the things I've been doing that's been super helpful is I just have a monthly playlist. So it's April now, right? So I have like January, February, and March, and now April playlists. It's like whenever I hear a song, whether like I have like a Sirius XM radio in my car, I'll just like go to different stations and listen to different stuff. Like my jam right now is there's a station called Willie's Roadhouse. It's kind of like all the outlaw country stuff, which that started a huge Dwight Yoakam like journey for me. I'm like obsessed with Dwight Yoakam now. But yeah, like I catalog like what I'm listening to, and then when I if I'm writing and I like I'm like, well, I don't know what to do, like, because everybody gets writer's block. It's not like I sit down at the computer and just like output excellence all the time. Like I'm either doing stuff that's bad or I'm like struggling, being like, whoa, Like, what do I do? Like, I'm so depressed. Like, like, so I'll just like put on one of those playlists and like, like a lot of this stuff sometimes is just like taking stuff from things that already exist, like whether it's like a rhythmic feeling or like a style or like maybe like a chord move or something like taking that, like, all right, cool, like I really like this song. I love how like the riff is in the song. And so I'll play the riff and I'll be like, okay, cool. Like, all right, well, like, what if it's like double the speed? Or like, what if it's in a different key? What if it's halftime? What if like in that song, like the drums are doing like doon cha doon doon cha? Like, what if I reverse the snare and the kick? What if it's doing a blast beat? Like all that, like, and then like sometimes that's like a really good way of just like getting yourself like out of this like, the inspiration's not coming. It's like, all right, well, it's like, think about like the blues, right? Like how many different songs have that like blues chord change? It's a genre of music that's meant to be like, it's meant to go places. It's like a common format that people agree upon, so like people can iterate off of it. So like sometimes a really helpful thing is to just take the stuff that you like listening to and make like an iteration of it. And there's a really fine line between like ripping something off and like being inspired by something and like like doing it backwards or something like that. But I forget the original question. I feel like I've been rambling, but
no, this is gold, dude.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, just seeking out inspiration in other stuff.
I have to
outside.
I find in my moments where I'm like, I haven't come up with anything in a while, like I haven't made anything, it's because I'm not listening to stuff. And this kind of ties back to seeking out situations where you get pushed, like getting back into like K-pop stuff again. I don't know if major label like pop acts like ever do this, but like they send around like there's like lists of like stuff that they're looking at, and they're like, we kind of like these songs, and like and so like I just made a playlist of all the references, and it's stuff that I would like never listen to, like some of it's like really corny like pop stuff, but I'll just like listen to it because like if it's like a song that I think is corny, but it has like a billion plays, there's probably something in there that's like, like there's probably some like expert level something going on in there that like I can like listen to, like, whoa, wow, that's kind of like a unique thing that they did.
Anytime I find myself listening to something that I'm not necessarily enjoying on just a personal level, I always go like, okay, now I'm doing research. Like now I'm just listening I know that I can learn something from this.
Yeah, like I'm annoyed that I'm listening to this song that's like a ubiquitous right now. It's on the radio every time I hone up, and it like pisses me off because I think it sucks. But like, what's in here that like people like? What is it that like is making people like desire the song so much or whatever?
Yeah, I felt that way about Ghost by Justin Bieber.
That's a good one.
It's when I went and listened to it, it was because it was the #1 song in America or whatever. And I listened to it and I was like, this is so basic in every single way, like so very formulaic and loopy with the like same fucking 4 magic chords of all time, and I was so frustrated because I was like, I mean, it's not even a good by Justin Bieber standards, but I was like, all right, there's got to be something in here, because if it's this big of a deal, there must be something that it's resonating. What am I missing? That's my first thought.
Yeah, and I something I try to keep in my mind is, it's okay to be vanilla. Like, not all vanilla is like created equal. Like I've had like gourmet, like exquisite, like vanilla bean, like ice cream before that I like remember tasting. There's like vanilla is like an important flavor, And the people that can like wield vanilla in interesting ways are probably some of the like the best people out there, you know?
Exquisite vanilla.
Yeah.
Well, this is all pure fucking gold to me. This is all high quality Madagascar vanilla.
Ooh, okay.
You know, the vanilla's fucking expensive. Have you ever noticed this?
Yeah.
It's like you get real vanilla, like a bean. It's like $20 for one bean.
Yeah.
So this is the high grade Madagascar vanilla bean. I love hearing what you have to say on all of this stuff. We could talk about this till the end of time, but
we could.
At this point, I feel like I'm holding up you doing all of the things that you just told us about. But I want to know. I want you to let all the people at home know when they can expect the new MYRONE. Do you have have a release date?
I don't have a hard date yet, but like it's done. I got to get can't just be a recording artist anymore. I got to have some content. I'm working on some stuff.
All right. But it's coming.
Yeah.
New Firstborn is on the way.
Late this year, maybe early next. I really want it to come out this year though. It's all I think about is putting Firstborn out and like playing, I don't know, like a bar with these guys.
In the fucking road.
Yeah.
Just anything.
Please.
Yeah. You unfortunately picked a shitty time to start an awesome band.
Man.
But
dude.
but at
So
least you're going to
gnarly.
have a tidal wave of material behind you to be hitting people with.
Yeah.
You know? And then where is the best place for people to find you?
Like to follow me or listen to my music.
Yeah.
I mean, my music's on Spotify. Both MYRONE and Firstborn is on Spotify. Firstborn is on Spotify courtesy of DistroKid. We use the split feature of DistroKid. I made everybody in Firstborn sign up for a DistroKid account, and that's how we do it. It's amazing. I think if you're in a collaborative project, it's like the best one. Also, shout out to Death Metal Office Drumming. For the viewers at home, if you've ever seen the Death Metal Office Drumming YouTube video, that is the guy that started DistroKid. So you know that it's a metal-friendly platform if that guy is the brains behind it.
You totally blew my mind with that fact as you were walking in here. That was so funny.
It's one of my favorite.
Now I got to go back and check it out because that's like artifacts of the early internet style.
And in the description for that video, he was like, "Check out my new website. It's called DistroKid. It helps you like get your music on all the platforms." Amazing.
I learned so many things today. And a perfect tie-in. What a transition to me saying thank you to DistroKid for sponsoring today's episode of the How Songs Are Made podcast.
Yeah,
I've also dropped a link to the playlist that you sent me of stuff that you've also worked on.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
In the description. So if you guys want to check that out and hear some stuff that MYRONE has written and or produced as well. So thank you so much for taking the time to be on. This was super fun.
Thanks for having me, man.
Fun and educational.
Good
the
to
best
be
kind of.
IRL.
Yeah.
Whoa!
What?
Whoa! Oh.
That's actually just a new Zoom background. That's a feature of Zoom. Make it seem like you're in real there together.
Nice. Cool.
That looks so silly. Well, thanks again, dude. And check y'all at home. Check out the howsongsaremade.podcast.com for all of these episodes. This will become an audio episode as well very soon, and we'll see you real soon. Bye bye. They can still hear us.